Hey, it's the Empire, Boxing Empire, Boxer Boxing. Now, my boy, Showtime Shawn Porter, man, just witnessed this weekend an epic fight with Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua, man. Alexander Usyk, former undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, went up to heavyweight and he completely dominated Anthony Joshua, man. Now, that being said, man, if you guys aren't a boxing buff and you're not a fanatic like myself, you would know that Shawn Porter beat Alexander Usyk in the amateurs. Yes. Showtime Shawn Porter beat one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in boxing today, right? And I can only imagine how the fighting went. It was Shawn Porter, bullying Alexander Usyk and pressuring him, like Shawn Porter always does, man. And with that being said, man, Showtime Shawn Porter is going to be fighting Terrence Crawford really soon. And I think this is a big game changer for Showtime Shawn Porter because he out-IQ'd a top pound-for-pound fighter in Alexander Usyk, right? And that being said, Alexander Usyk and Terrence Crawford have a lot of similarities, right? They're high IQ fighters. They're, they have Olympic pedigrees, and they have a resume that's uncanny in boxing, right? There's only a few undisputed champions, right? Alexander Usyk, Terrence Bud Crawford, and Josh Taylor, right? There's only a few undisputed champions of boxing. Alexander Usyk's one of the three. And that being said, this fight is going to be a more competitive and intriguing fight because Shawn Porter is one of the most aggressive fighters in boxing, right? He's so aggressive that he doesn't really make time for you to think. He pressures you at all times, right? That's what makes him so exciting because we know he's going to push you to the brink. And can Terrence Crawford really handle that kind of style? Ironically enough, Terrence Crawford, when he fights a guy who really comes to bring it, that spelled trouble for him, right? When he fought the Mean Machine, he got dropped to the straight right. Mean Machine imposed himself on Terrence Crawford, right? So, when Shawn Porter imposes himself on Terrence Crawford, he can hang with him, but how long can he do it for? Can he do it for 12 rounds straight? There's been a lot of back and forth between the two fighters, Terrence Crawford and Showtime Shawn Porter, and this is going to be a remarkable fight. Shawn Porter has always gave every one of his losses, fighters who were able to beat him, one of the toughest fights, right? Keith Thurman's most exciting fight he ever had, in my opinion. Yeah, it's bar none. It's more exciting than a Pacquiao fight, right? The Showtime Shawn Porter fight versus the Danny Garcia was an amazing fight. One of his fights where not only was he out hustling Danny Garcia, but at times he was out boxing Danny Garcia, right? And the Kell Brook fight, that fight was a clinch fest where Kell Brook was able to grab Shawn Porter before he can really get any work off. With that being said, though, Shawn Porter has basically fought for every title at the welterweight. Yeah, he fought for every title at the welterweight division, right? He fought for the IBF strap. He fought for the WBA strap. He won the WBA strap. He won the WBC strap. And he fought for the IBF strap. Now, WBA, IBF, WBC, and now the final strap is the WBO. This is how elite Showtime Shawn Porter is. He's so elite. He's fighting for every single title you can basically get at the welterweight division, right? The guy has stayed elite at the boxing, and he's definitely the top dog in the welterweight division. And one could argue a pound-for-pound fighter because looking back in hindsight, Alexander Usyk's a top pound-for-pound fighter now ever since the defeat of Anthony Joshua, and that puts Shawn Porter up there as well because Shawn Porter beat Alexander Usyk. Now, they say triangle theories don't work in boxing, but this is not a triangle theory. This is more like an IQ test between Terrence Bud Crawford and Alexander Usyk. Terrence Crawford, he could do a little more than Alexander Usyk as far as not just fighting orthodox, but he can switch it up to southpaw too and completely dominate you by switching stances. But understand that Alexander Usyk's a natural southpaw, and Terrence Crawford pretends to be a southpaw fighter. That being said, Terrence Crawford going southpaw is not really going to bother Showtime Shawn Porter. It's not going to bother him at all. So this is going to be a really big deal, man. I'm really excited to see Shawn Porter and Terrence Crawford in the ring, and this is definitely one of the biggest fights of the year because this is what we really wanted to see. Terrence Crawford get challenged in the welterweight division and get challenged by a fighter that we knew was a threat. You know, he's had a lot of soft touches over there at Top Rank. Their roster for the welterweight division is extremely thin, like, you know, wheat thins. You know, it's basically non-existent. You know how you turn the paper sideways and you can barely see the paper anymore, and it's sitting right in front of you? That's basically Top Rank's roster at welterweight. It's not too deep. It's not too deep. PBC has all top guys. You know, Keith one-time Thurmans, the Danny Garcias, the Manny Pacquiao's, Udanis Ugas, Errol Spence Jr. The list goes on and on and on. Finally, Terrence Crawford. It seems like his contract will be up very soon under Top Rank, and he can sign with whoever he wants. Right? There's been a lot of whispers and rumors about who he's signing with, but till then, he's finally fighting a top PBC fighter that everyone really wants to see. Terrence Crawford being former number one pound for pound fighter in the world, we wanted that justified, and we want to justify with him fighting the best. So we're really gonna see how this whole thing plays out with Shawn Porter, but this is definitely a mental edge for Shawn Porter by beating Alexander Usyk. It must be bizarre to see someone you beat in the amateurs, right, at 165. That's the round division Shawn Porter and Usyk fought at, become the heavyweight champion of the world, right? This is the equivalent of saying something like Keith one-time Thurman beat Deontay Wilder in the amateurs, or Manny Pacquiao beat Tyson Fury in the amateurs. You know, this is the equivalent of that. You know, or I guess you could say like Errol Spence beating Tyson Fury in the amateurs. You know, if that happened a long time ago and then that guy becomes heavyweight champion of the world, there'd be a lot more buzz about it, and I think people should really talk about it. Yes, it was in the amateurs, but that still doesn't really matter, because understand that Alexander Usyk, he was always a bigger fighter than Showtime Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter was able to go back down in weight, right? That means he was at his physical peak around that weight at 165 to drop down. Alexander Usyk was still filling out, and he got a lot bigger to heavyweight. So, you know, that being the case, usually the heavier man has a bigger advantage than the smaller man. But Showtime Shawn Porter, you know, he can bully a bigger fighter. What makes you think? What do you think he's going to do to a normal-sized fighter or a smaller fighter in Terrence Bud Crawford? This being his third weight class in boxing, right? Former 130 champion, 135 champion, 140 champion. Now he's a 135 champion, 140 champion, then now 147, right? So we're going to see how this whole thing plays out, man. This is a big statement for Shawn Porter. This is a big deal. People need to be talking about it. And if they're not going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. Anyway, let me know how you feel about it, though. Like, comment, subscribe. It's the Empire. Geobox Empire. Peace. Geobox.